picture's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with part 2 of my I Know I Said I Wouldn't, But I Did book haul. And as I explained in part 1, I won't go through all that again. I didn't have to pay as much tax yesterday as I thought I would, which to me justified blowing 3,000 yen on 11 books. And this is part 2 of that video. If you want the full dramatic story, go back to part 1. So, moving on. This is kind of my first Iris Murdoch buy. The Sandcastle. Look at that cover, isn't that fantastic? If I can get the glare off it. Originally published in 1957, so fairly early. Yeah, her first one was 54, so this is pretty early. And it is about a frustrated, middle-aged, and unhappily married schoolmaster. I have not read an Iris Murdoch. I don't know if I'll start with this one. I think I'm going to start with Eric Carl Anderson's favorite, The Seas, which they have a lovely larger paperback copy. I forget the name of that series. It's the same people, vintage, in this red vintage series. They have it. It's Kinokuniya, so which I'll buy new once I can save $15 or something. But this was $2 and I snatched it up. So it starts out in quite a lively way. So here it is. 500 guineas, said Moore's wife. Well, I never. It's the market price, said Moore. You could articulate more distinctly, said Nan, if you took that rather damp-looking cigarette out of your mouth. I said it's the market price, said Moore. He threw his cigarette away. Bledyard would have done it for nothing, said Nan. Bledyard is mad, said Moore, and thinks portrait painting is wicked. If you ask me, it's you and the school governors that are mad, said Nan. You must have money to burn. First all that floodlighting, and then this. Floodlighting! As if it wasn't bad enough to have to see the school during the day. All right, you get quite a picture of, I assume that's the husband and wife, about their lovely marriage. So, the cover's pretty cool. Pretty cool, hey? Oh, and I said it's kind of my first Iris Murdoch. I picked up a used copy of The Sacred and Profane Love Machine because of the title. Didn't know a thing about Iris Murdoch. It was before the movie Iris had come out, I think. But I picked it up because I loved the title. But it had a really bent spine, and for that and other reasons, presumably, I never did read it, and I'm pretty sure I don't have it anymore. But it was a really cracked spine. So I knew that I shouldn't have bought it, and I knew that once I started reading it, the pages would start coming loose or whatever. So this is my new first copy of Iris Murdoch. Next, this is another author that I have yet to read, but have a feeling I am going to love. Wallace Stegner, All the Little Live Things. This was originally published in 1967. A lovely softcover penguin edition. I really struggled to get the price tag off, so I gouged the cover, which I'm very sad about. But I have another of his novels in my pile that was a gift from a dear friend from Litzy. I can't remember which title that was. And now this one. But there's a story, kind of a family story about Wallace Stegner. He spent... Now, I can't remember. I think it was his childhood. He spent several years of his childhood in East End, Saskatchewan, a tiny village where my grandmother, my mum's mum, was born and grew up. And he wrote a memoir about it called Wolf Willow, and I have never read it. Mum said that she read it and has a copy on the shelf somewhere to give to me, but I don't remember ever seeing it at home. But his parents would have known my great-grandparents in East End, Saskatchewan, because they were contemporaries, and it was such a small town. So I really want to read that book. Anyway, so this one, I like the opening. And interesting, the chapter title is, How Do I Know What I Think Till I See What I Say? Now that's a saying that I've heard. It's not really common, but I've heard it several times, and I wonder if it comes from this book. Does anybody know? I didn't get around to Googling that, but otherwise it's kind of not a cliche, but if he didn't invent it, he shouldn't have used it for his chapter title. But anyway, here's the opening paragraph. A half hour after I came down here, the rains began. They came without fuss, the thin edge of a circular Pacific storm that is probably dumping buckets on Oregon. One minute I was looking out my study window into the greeny gold twilight under the live oak, watching a towhee kick up the leaves, and the next I saw that the air beyond the tree was scratched with fine rain. Now the flagstones are shining, the tops of the horizontal oak limbs are dark wet, there is a growing drip from the dome of the tree above, the towhee's olive back has melted into umber dusk and gone. I sit here watching evening, and the winter rains come on together, and I feel as slack and dull as the day or the season, or not slack so much as bruised. I am like a man so stiff from a beating that every move reminds him and fills him with outrage. What an enigmatic opening paragraph. Beautiful description of the oncoming rain, and then ending and putting us right inside the body of the narrator. So, wow, definitely am feeling an urge to just keep reading from there. But yeah, I've never read Wallace Stegner. I can't remember the one that I have. It's in the back pile there, but I will get to Wallace Stegner one of these days. The last three in this book haul are all William Faulkner's. I picked up not a complete set, but a set of, what's this publisher? Vintage editions of his novel. 3 novels, $3 a piece. As I Lay Dying, The Unvanquished, and Go Down Moses. So here's the story of me and Faulkner. I tried to read his Absalom last year. It was for a book challenge where I had to read a book that had an exclamation point in the title. How stupid is that? But so I tried it, and I thought it was just incredible. But with my reading practice of reading several books at one time, Absalom is not a novel that can be read alongside anything else. It's just all-encompassing and so dense, and I just thought it was wonderful, but I couldn't keep up with it. So I put it aside with the thought that I would get back to it and read it alone, only Absalom, for a month or however long it took me to read it, maybe less, but it's a really dense text. But then I've watched Adam of Memento Mori talk about Faulkner, and I believe I heard him explicitly say, don't start with Absalom, work your way up. So these are earlier novels. I actually can't remember where Absalom fits in, but I'm assuming from the density of the prose, it's definitely late Faulkner. So I thought it might be fun to finish off this book haul, to read you the opening paragraph, or in one cases it's like a page and a half, but of these 3 novels in order, just to see how Faulkner's style evolved from very normal prose to Faulknerian. So the first one is, and I'll probably read these or some of these before I ever attempt Absalom again. So this, As I Lay Dying, it is subtitled The Corrected Text, so it was taken from his manuscript copy. Originally published 1930. So just the very short opening paragraph. Jewel and I come up from the field, following the path in single file. Although I am 15 feet ahead of him, anyone watching us from the cotton house can see Jewel's frayed and broken straw hat a full head above my own. So that's just very ordinary prose. It's nice, but just kind of nondescript, and certainly doesn't seem stylistically challenging at all, okay? So that's the 1930 novel, As I Lay Dying. The next one, The Unvanquished, was published in 1934. Originally. And what a change in his style. I'm not going to read the full first paragraph because it's 2 pages long, but I'll read maybe 60% of it. Behind the smokehouse that summer, Ringo and I had a living map. Although Vicksburg was just a handful of chips from the woodpile and the river, a trench scraped into the packed earth with the point of a hoe, it, river, city, and terrain, lived, possessing even in miniature that ponderable though passive recalcitrance of topography which outweighs artillery, against which the most brilliant of victories and the most tragic of defeats are but the loud noises of a moment. To Ringo and me it lived, if only because of the fact that the sun-impacted ground drank water faster than we could fetch it from the well. The very setting of the stage for conflict, a prolonged and well-nigh hopeless ordeal in which we ran, panting and interminable, with the leaking bucket between well-house and battlefield, the two of us needing first to join forces and spend ourselves against a common enemy, time, before we could engender between us and hold intact the pattern of recapitulant mimic furious victory, like a cloth, a shield between ourselves and reality, between us and fact and doom. Wow. So yeah, quite a evolution in his style, eh? It's pretty dense. I think most of it sounds really beautiful and deeply intriguing to me. There's a couple things I don't really like. And I'm not going to do an extended critique, but just, isn't it interesting? In 4 years, how much his style had evolved. So that's The Unvanquished. It's one of his lesser-known books. I don't hear many people talking about this one, but interesting. And then Go Down Moses. It's quite a bit later, 6 years later, 1940. Okay? And this one, watch the line breaks in the text that I'm going to type up on the screen is exactly how it's set out in the text, okay? So I am going to read the opening section, which is about a full page, and this is really dense. And you'll notice there's no period at the end, even though the very next thing is the number 2 for chapter 2, but there's no period in the last word. So, alrighty. 1. Isaac McCaslin, Uncle Ike, past 70 and nearer 80 than he ever corroborated anymore. A widower now, and uncle to half a county, and father to no one. This was not something participated in or even seen by himself, but by his elder cousin, McCaslin Edmonds, grandson of Isaac's father's sister, and so descended by the distaff, yet notwithstanding the inheritor, and in his time the bequester, of that which some had thought then, and some still thought should have been Isaac's, since his was the name in which the title to the land had first been granted from the Indian patent, and which some of the descendants of his father's slaves still bore in the land. But Isaac was not one of these, a widower these 20 years, who in all his life had owned but one object more than he could wear and carry in his pockets and his hands at one time, and this was the narrow iron cot and the stained lean mattress which he used camping in the woods for deer and bear, or for fishing, or simply because he loved the woods, who owned no property and never desired to, since the earth was no man's but all men's, as light and air and weather were, who lived still in the cheap frame bungalow in Jefferson, which his wife's father gave them on their marriage, and which his wife had willed to him at her death, and which he had pretended to accept, acquiesce to humour her, ease her going, but which was not his, will or not, chancery, dying wishes, main possession, or whatever, himself merely holding it for his wife's sister and her children, who had lived in it with him since his wife's death, holding himself welcome to live in one room of it as he had during his wife's time, or she during her time, or the sister-in-law and her children during the rest of his and after. Not something he had participated in or even remembered except from the hearing, the listening, come to him through and from his cousin McCaslin, born in 1850 and 16 years his senior, and hence, his own father being near 70 when Isaac, an only child, was born, rather his brother than cousin, and rather his father than either, out of the old time, the old days. Oh, that is so incredible! Jesus! I find it 90% accessible, but it's really dense, but and I experience it so much more deeply when I read it aloud. I think when I get to the denser Faulkner, I'm going to do it on audio with the text or read it out loud to myself, because I got so much more out of that just now than I did when I scanned it. I just think that's stunning. So what do you think? This, just based on the very short first paragraph, this is just basic prose, right? It's fine, but it's not Faulknerian. And these last two. and this one is the denser of the two. And I'm guessing that Absalom came after this. I didn't check. I'll put it on the bottom if I remember, if it's a mistake, to confirm or reject my theory. But so I don't know when I'll get to Faulkner. Maybe this year. Maybe the first one. But I'm really stoked to. I think I wrote whatever his famous short story that everybody studied at school. The name's gone, but aside from that, aside from 50 or 75 pages of Absalom, I haven't cracked him. So that is my I knew I said I wouldn't, but I did book haul, the chatty version. Thanks for watching.